When James reviewed the Corsair Frame 4000D a few months ago, he liked it a great deal.
So it's a good case this, it's a good evolution over the original 4000D, and I think it's an improvement on some of the recent cases we've seen from Corsair like the 6500X.
And today I have the Corsair Frame 5000D, a case that is supposed to be better than the 4000D because it gives you more options than the 4000D. But the thing that's particularly exciting me today is that I have a world exclusive for Kit Guru. It's a billet aluminium motherboard tray for the Frame series of cases, and it's going to go on sale in some months' time for around $300. That's right, this motherboard tray is twice the price of the Frame 5000D. At the recent Computex, we did our YouTube video with Corsair from their dedicated video room. The case getting most of the attention from Corsair in this room was the Air 5400, which looks absolutely fascinating, but sadly it is being demonstrated without any components inside. In the corner of the video room there was a Frame 5000D with a fully built system, and it looked absolutely great, and we spent some time going around the features of the case and the system. In the main Corsair room where we'd done our vertical video for TikTok, there was far more to see, and in that main room the Frame 5000D case was being shown off to far better effect. Price of 5,000?
It's around 180.
I thought it was 80 for a moment. I nearly said 80 on camera.
Wow.
That would have been...
Then they would have had to honor that price too. That's the way it works, right?
Could you say that to the camera? If a YouTuber makes an error on camera, is Corsair obliged to honour it?
Basically, yeah. That's from what I understand. It's a rule written long ago, early days of tech review. But yeah.
Thank you, Paul of Paul's Hardware.
You're welcome.
Once we'd recovered from the shock of Paul showing us that Californians can do the driest of British humour, we took a look at a Frame 5000D in a different configuration. Corsair has an ecosystem called Frame, and they've installed a screen on the side named Xenon Edge, and this Xenon Edge will set you back about $249. It's not cheap, but it's incredibly large, so pro rata, reasonable value. To save you the hassle of commenting, I'll fact check myself. Yes, that screen is named Xeneon Edge, not Xenon Edge. This image shows some of the different configurations of the Frame 5000D. On the left, a vertical GPU, in the centre, a horizontal GPU with cooling down the bottom on the side, and on the right, the configuration we've just seen with a screen in the bottom of the case. But this is just scratching the surface, as this animation shows. You can use an AIO cooler, install 200mm fans at the front, install a Xeneon Edge screen on the side and change the front panel, go for a HydroX custom loop cooling system, use an air cooler on your CPU with fans on the side, or switch out the motherboard tray. There are plenty of options for changing the main panel and also the front panel. And that brings us to the Billet aluminium $300 motherboard tray that I briefly showed you. Let's hark back to James's review of the Frame 4000D.
Another removable part of the case is the motherboard tray. So apparently there's going to be some different motherboard trays you can fit in here. There's a billet aluminium one, so you can swap this tray out, get the cables out of the way and remove a few screws. And that just pushes forward and then release really easily. You can see there, motherboard tray out of the system, all the cutouts there for back connect motherboards.
And then take a look at a prototype Corsair case we saw at Computex. I'm finishing off at a Frame 4000D prototype. Now we understand Frame 4000D. The thing here is that you can remove the motherboard tray. Indeed, in this instance it's been replaced by a power board from Singularity down in Australia. The power board has to comply with Corsair's documentation, but essentially it's a version of ATX. And now you've seen those various video clips, I hope you understand why when we were organising this review of the Frame 5000D, I asked about accessories to go with the case, and I was told, nope, they're coming 6 months time or so. I suspect that'll actually be January of next year, which would suggest CES, And then I was told we do, however, have one motherboard tray. I said, well, I'll have it then, please. To which Corsair said, well, okay, we can do that, but we want to emphasize the fact this motherboard tray is not specific to the Frame 5000D. It is part of the Frame system, which means it also works with the Frame 4000D. So they sent me a Frame 4000D and asked me to show this motherboard tray in the Frame 4000D before I showed it in the 5000D. I said yes, so I'm obliged, aren't I? So let's do that. As I showed in that clip from James's review, I remove the right hand panel, away with the cable management. And out with 4 screws. It's worth pointing out the stock motherboard tray includes cable management loops. It also includes this, which says link, and you take your iCUE link control unit and it attaches magnetically. Now we know one thing about aluminium, which is that aluminium is not magnetic, and that's why we have these inserts screwed in, which are magnetic. So we can take our link unit, et voila. Isn't that nice? What we don't have with this Elite motherboard tray is any form of cable management, but we do have a whole series of threaded holes. So I'm assuming that Corsair is going to supply the equivalent of these hook and loop straps. Bearing in mind these have to thread through these tabs and we don't have those on this. So there's going to be some sort of cable management, I have no doubt, which will attach on that edge, possibly there as well. But we don't have that. Right, let's install this motherboard tray. To install the Elite motherboard tray, we want to engage these little machine cutouts. With these tabs here, pull the motherboard tray back into position, and then install 4 screws. Do the first here for my convenience and flip it around so you can see what's going on. And there we go. I'll leave it to you to decide whether $300 looks like good value for this motherboard tray, but it is certainly very smart and it's installed in the Frame 4000D. And the specific model we have on review is the Frame 5000D RS ARGB, and the noise and the light show is provided by the 4 supplied RS 140mm fans. The regular Frame 5000D RS without RGB lighting costs $190 US, 155 euros or 125 pounds. This Frame 5000D RS ARGB costs $200, 180 euros or 150 pounds. When we compare the Frame 5000D against the Frame 4000D, we can see it's larger in each of the 3 dimensions. Where the 4000D supports up to 7 140mm fans, the 5000D supports 12, and where the Frame 4000D supports up to 10 120mm fans, the Frame 5000D supports 14. The big difference is that where the Frame 4000D is limited, if limited is the word, to a 360mm radiator in the roof, the Frame 5000D can accommodate a 420mm radiator. If instead you prefer to use 360mm radiators, you can install 2 simultaneously in either the front, roof or side. And now let's pull off some panels. So it's 2 thumb screws on the main panel. Pop the back, pull it away. I'm going to make an observation that that tab there arrived bent, as though the panel had been jammed into place. Apparently this case is part of a small first batch of early samples that went to certain reviewers and were then air freighted over, so it might not be representative of the final quality. Glass is tinted as we'd expect with a black case. 2 thumb screws for the top panel, and we lift and pull away. You will note There's a little strap, which is handy for pulling the top panel away. Corsair warns us that this strap is not to be used for lifting the case. That's sound advice. The front panel simply comes away. The front panel has 4 location posts, 1, 2, 3, but that one is broken off. Here it is. So that's the second fault I've noted with this sample. I'm going to put this down, as I say, to this being early production, and therefore I'm going to hope it's not indicative of general quality. Filter out in the front to reveal the 3 RS 140mm ARGB fans. We were told at Computex that this panel is 1mm steel, and judging by the weight I can certainly believe it. There's no noise deadening material. You used to see panels with like a bitumen type material in them, which would deaden noise, add to weight, but it would also make the panel somewhat more rigid. This is fairly rigid. I suspect they're using thicker steel because it's a larger unsupported structure than the smaller 4000D. And now you can see the structure of the Frame 5000D better. Let's just revisit that animation I showed you from Corsair, and you'll note that one of the accessory changes that they are promising us is a low profile power supply shroud, and that explains how this side panel can change in appearance depending on whether or not you have the low profile power supply shroud and or that Xenon display. A significant feature of the frame cases, both with the 4000D and now the 5000D, is cable management and this pattern of holes that have become known as squircles because they are squares with circular corners. The official name is Rapid Route 2. Undo the Velcro, pull away the cables, and if you wish to adjust the position of this buckle, pop out that central plastic pin and away, and you can now move it to a different location, anywhere you like. I of course shall take a different tack by removing the entire motherboard tray and replacing it with the aluminium Elite motherboard tray. So out with the original and in with the new, and doesn't that just look great? Before I build a test PC into the Frame 5000D case, I'm going to take a quick look at support for stealth motherboards with backside connectors. In this instance, it's a Project Zero from MSI. Sadly, it's a Z790 motherboard because the latest and greatest AMD boards in the Project Zero range still have not yet arrived, so this is previous generation. So I am looking at this Z790 Project Zero board with a Core i9-14900K, but because it's 14th gen, I'm not going to use it for the actual review. The memory installed is some Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR5. Not that that is relevant at the moment, because I'm not actually going to run this system. It just looks the absolute business on that motherboard. To my mind, a perfect match. So let's install the motherboard. The power supply I'm using in this review is the Corsair RM1000X, which is one of Corsair's shift power supplies, so the connections go on the side. I'm going to plug in some of the cables just so we can get a look at how this Project Zero motherboard would look in practice. Obviously not going to do any cable management because this motherboard's coming out in a matter of moments, but on the business side, well, it looks the business. I like that. And the sooner MSI comes up with the AMD X870E Project Zero, I'm going to take a good close look at it. Meanwhile, this Z790 Project Zero motherboard, it's coming out, and we're going to get on and put in a proper PC so we can actually test the Frame 5000D. And here we have a Gigabyte Z890 Aorus Pro Ice motherboard installed, along with an Intel Core Ultra 9285K and the Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR5 CU DIMMs memory. Makes all the more sense in this installation. And the SSD Corsair MP600 Elite 2TB. The headline feature of the Frame 5000D is its ability to house a 420mm cooler in the roof of the case. So I'm going for this iCUE Link Titan 420 RX RGB. It's quite a mouthful of a name. So let's get that installed in this case, shall we? Hang on, which way around am I going to put this? I'm at the back. It's going to be tight. I'll experiment and I'll get back to you. As expected, the iCUE link Titan is a very close fit in this case. You can see there's actually a gap at either end of the radiator, but of course you've got the iCUE link cables to consider. So it is actually touching at the front, and at the back this fan blade is just rubbing on the hoses. I'm going to have to do something with a cable tie there. I came across a nasty surprise during installation, which I don't think you will come across. I hope, is because, as I said before, this is an early sample. I had to move the InfiniRail to spread them out because they're set for a 120 fan. These are 140s. And what I discovered is this. That screw is a Phillips number 2. This screw, which is its mate, is not. It's a Torx. It's not how it's intended to be. The screws should be the same as each other. I believe both Torx, but regardless, not one Torx and one Phillips. That is an error. But if anybody else comes across the same problem, it's clearly wider spread than just one case that went to Leo. The final component is a Pallet GameRock OC RTX 5080 graphics card. Blimey, that's a big graphics card and there's plenty of space in front of it. Let's do up a few screws and I can get the PC running. The finished PC looks good and I'm enjoying the light show, although I'm not happy about the way I've had to tether the AIO hoses to clear the rear fan. No doubt a more elegant solution is possible. To test the Frame 5000D, I'm running a combination of Speedway stress test and Cinebench R23. Our Core Ultra 9285K is drawing 235 watts. And the Pallet RTX 5080 is drawing 320 watts. Total system power draw 660 watts. For our first run, the case fans are set to 50%, which is 800 RPM, and the AIO is on the Corsair balanced preset, which is also 800 RPM, and it sounds like this. At an ambient of 20 degrees, the processor is running at 74 degrees Celsius, and the graphics at 63 degrees. For the second run, we increased the case fans to 75%, which is 1200 RPM. AIO is still on balanced profile, and it sounds like this. The CPU is now running at 72 degrees and the graphics at 62 degrees. For the third run, we keep the case fans at 75% or 1200 RPM, and the AIO is increased to extreme profile, which is 1250 RPM, and it sounds like this. CPU temperature is now 71 degrees and the graphics temperature 61 degrees. For our fourth and final run, the case fans are set to 100%, which is 1700 RPM, and the AIO remains on extreme at 1250 RPM, which sounds like this. Temperatures are unchanged, the CPU at 71 degrees and the graphics at 61 degrees. And we come to my conclusions about the Corsair Frame 5000D, and they align with James's conclusions about the Frame 4000D because the cases are so similar. Number one, on the pros, it's easy to build in and you got good access to everything, including the EPS connections at the top of the motherboard, which is a bane of our lives. Corsair has solved this problem. Secondly, it has good airflow and therefore good cooling. And thirdly, the promised accessories look interesting. I have seen one of those accessories. I like it. I want to see more accessories. Cons, the negatives. We need slightly more space in the roof to properly support a 420mm cooler. I have done something horrible with the cable tie to keep the hoses away from that rear fan. A few millimeters would have made all the difference. So yes, this case nominally supports 420mm coolers, but not really. Secondly, the promised accessories are not available, and judging by this $300 motherboard tray, they're going to be expensive. We know the Xenon display that goes in the side is expensive. I imagine it'll be true of everything else. Thirdly, this might be specific to me or a handful of reviewers. Our early sample had some teething problems. I don't expect them to manifest in retail samples, but who knows. And fourth, if you turn up the fan speed, the system gets loud. And that is, after all, without a full complement of fans. Overall, I like the Frame 5000D, but the Frame 4000D does everything we require, and the Frame 5000D isn't quite large enough to deliver on its promises. So my advice is buy a 4000D and save a little bit of money and some space on your desk. It's a worth buying. It's an 8 out of 10. Do please check us out at kitguru.net, and also we're on TikTok.